Professor, since we have a limited time, I want to shift a little bit our discussion to, we're talking about Obama. I would like you to give an overview assessment of his foreign policy in general and his toward the Middle East in particular, and the way that he backed off from even suggesting freezing the settlement, and then now there is some kind of probably hope that he will try to have in his second term some sort of policy. You know, the two-state solution is almost being eliminated by the settlement and by other action by the Israeli government, and there is no. So what can he do? What do you think? What's your assessment of his?
He can do anything he likes. I mean, if the U.S. lays down the law, Israel has to follow it. And that's happened over and over again. I mean, it takes just to pick one case almost at random, take the Israeli invasion of Lebanon in 1982. I don't have to tell you what happened then, pretty awful. But by mid-August, and the U.S. supported it strongly, you know, Reagan blocked any action to the UN, the U.S. was arming the Israelis, the press was supporting it, and so on. By mid-August, it was becoming harmful to U.S. interests. The international reaction was growing, protests over the atrocities, destroying Beirut and so on. Nobody cared much about destroying southern Lebanon, but a capital is different. And you may recall that Menachem Begin, Israeli prime minister at the time, was almost euphoric. He was describing, in his image, he had Hitler cornered in his bunker. It was World War II all over again, but this time he had Hitler, Arafat, cornered in his bunker. He could move in and kill Hitler. Huge thing. Well, Reagan simply told him, it's over. Get out. Did he have a choice? No, he withdrew. I mean, then...
So that could be applicable anytime?
Anytime.
That the United States will be able to tell the Israeli what to do?
There's case after case like that. If there were time, I could run through them. And it runs right through the second Bush administration. Obama is, in fact, the first U.S. president who has not imposed constraints on Israel, which, of course, it has to follow, just because of the relations of power, which are obvious. But Obama hasn't done it. With regard to the settlements, it's true that he ritualistically repeated, that you shouldn't continue settlements. And you'll recall that when it came to the Security Council in February 2011, Obama cast a veto of a resolution which called for implementing official U.S. policy. What it called was for an end to settlement expansion. Incidentally, settlement expansion is a minor issue. It's the settlements that he issued, not. But this called for official U.S. policy, Obama's policy, and settlement expansion. The U.S. vetoed it. Netanyahu understands this. I mean, it's don't do it, but with a wink. And we're not going to do anything about it. And there's absolutely no surprise about this. I actually wrote about Obama before the 2008 primaries, just looking at his webpage, the way he publicized himself. And what he said about the Middle East was pretty interesting. It was full of his love for Israel and so on, and nothing about the Palestinians. There was a sentence or two about Lebanon. This was right after the Israeli invasion of Lebanon. And what he said about Lebanon is that, he said, as a senator, he was describing his achievements. He said one of his main achievements as a senator in 2006 was to co-sponsor a Senate resolution calling on the government not to interfere in any way with Israel's military operations in Lebanon and to punish anyone who resisted them, meaning Syria, Hezbollah, anybody. And that was how he presented himself with great pride. And it continues like that. During Operation Cast Lead, for example, in Gaza, a horror story, Obama had already been elected, but he hadn't yet been inaugurated. And he was asked repeatedly, do you have anything to say about it? He said, no, I can't say anything. There's only one president. I'm not president yet. He did, however, say that his heart goes out to the children who are under attacked by missiles, namely the ones in Sderot in Israel, period. The operation was very carefully timed to end hours before his inauguration. So therefore, he came in, there's now one president, but the operation had just ended, not by accident, and therefore he didn't have to say anything about it. When he was asked, he said, well, it's best to look forward, not to look backward. That's the standard line.
So it's all like sideshow?
It's all smoke and mirrors.
Smoke and mirrors about how Obama being lectured by Netanyahu, how there is no relationship, close relationship between them, and that's one of the objective of his visit, is to mend this kind of relation and to enforce the relation.
I mean,
what kind of your assessment of the people when they say the enormous influence of the Israeli lobby in the United States is the one that guiding U.S. policy, and that's why U.S. president is a victim of such pressure?
Several. First of all, the question is, what do you mean by the Israel lobby? I mean, there's AIPAC, the Jewish lobby, but there's a huge Christian Zionist movement. There always has been. Goes back to England in the 19th century. But elite Christian Zionism has always been very strong. But now there's a huge right-wing Christian fundamentalist movement. It's a large part of the base of the Republican Party. They are super pro-Zionist. They support Israel on just about everything. They're also passionately anti-Semitic. You take a look at their theology. You know, it's supposed to be a war and Armageddon, the saved souls rise to heaven, the Jews go to eternal perdition, and so on. You can't get more anti-Semitic than that. But they support Israel on everything. The Republicans have pretty much abandoned any pretense of being a normal parliamentary party. They're just in lockstep service to the very rich and the corporate sector, with a kind of a catechism that everyone has to repeat, kind of like the old Communist Party. Well, you can't get votes that way, so they have to get votes some other way. And the way they've been doing it is by mobilizing sectors of the population that have always been there. Like, for example, the United States has always been an extremely religious country. I doubt that there's, maybe Saudi Arabia, but I don't suppose there's any other country in the world where half the population thinks the world was created a few thousand years ago, say. A second question, more fundamental. You take a look at American power. Whatever the Israeli lobby is, it's tiny as compared with the business lobbies, the military lobby, the Business Roundtable, Chamber of Commerce, high-tech industry, and so on. These are far more powerful. If they thought their interests were being harmed, they'd put the lobby out of business in no time, but they don't. And the reason is they basically support the policies. So also, Israel happens to be a very good investment opportunity for high-tech corporations. Like American high-tech corporations invest in Israel. It's kind of like the United States. It's a rich society, very sharply differentiated, but a highly educated, high-tech sector, pretty inexpensive by American standards. What do the Palestinians offer the United States? They don't have any wealth. They don't have any power. They don't have any rights. I mean, it's elementary. So on the one side, you have plenty of arguments. On the other side, nothing. Is it hard to figure out what policy is going to be?
Well, Professor, we wish to have more time, but we know that you have other engagement, and we thank you for the time. And hopefully we can have a second round to have more conversation with you, maybe here or in Lebanon, since you're visiting. I want to thank you very much for your time. And I just, last thing I want to tell you, there is no hope that this administration will do anything, any new initiative vis-a-vis the Israeli policy.
There is hope. And I'm not quite as pessimistic about a short-term two-state settlement as you suggested. The hope is what it always is, organized public opinion. That's the way changes come, almost always, whether it's women's rights, opposition to aggression, name it. Organized mass public opinion makes a difference. I mean, whatever criticism there can be about the United States, it's a very free society. The government has very limited capacity to coerce. They have mechanisms, but it's mostly persuasion, or marginalization. They can't use force very much. That makes a difference. There's no mukhabarat. Makes a huge difference. And it's changing. So on college campuses, for example, probably the major issue for organized action is Palestinian solidarity. That's a radical change from a few years ago. I mean, I've been giving talks on these issues for 50 years. Up until pretty recently, I had to have police protection on college campuses. And now it's totally different. Big crowds, very engaged, you can't get a hostile question. That's going to influence the general society as it has in the past. Apartheid fell.
Well, thank you again, Professor. أعزائي المشاهدين، شكرا جزيلا لإصغائكم، وسنلتقي في لقاءات أخرى وحوارات خاصة مع مفكرين أمريكيين وغيرهم. إلى اللقاء في الحوار القادم. شكرا جزيلا.